The polished brass door handles of the oak doors at the Golden Fork reflected the golden light of late afternoon, an almost theatrical gleam that marked the entrance to a world reserved for Boston's elite. For Marcus Thompson, that was a portal to a reality he served, but from which he would never be a part. He adjusted his black tie with an automatic gesture, straightened his immaculate white shirt, and took a deep breath before pushing the heavy door open. The environment was familiar to him, yet the feeling of displacement never completely vanished. The kitchen pulsed with organized chaos. Pans hissed, orders were shouted in a mixture of English and French, and the rich aroma of perfectly reduced sauces hung in the air. At the center of it all, wearing his usual impeccable white coat, was Chef Antoine, a figure of authority with an explosive temper. "Marcus," his voice echoed through the space, "you've arrived just in time. The mayor's party was added at the last minute and will be in your section." Marcus nodded, walking over to his locker. He removed his worn messenger bag from his shoulder and stored it in the metal compartment. Inside rested a music book, one of the few remnants of the past he allowed himself to carry. At 36 years old, music was still a persistent whisper within him, even though his present was reduced to carefully rehearsed steps between tables and crystal glasses. In the main dining room, Lisa, a veteran of the restaurant, organized her station with the efficiency of someone who had dedicated decades to the craft. "Did you see the new intern?" she asked, without taking her eyes off her notepad. Poor thing, trembling like a green twig. Marcus discreetly glanced in the direction of the young woman. The intern, whom he discovered was named Sarah, was struggling to open a bottle of wine. Her hands trembled as she tried to manipulate the corkscrew with precision. "We were all new once," Marcus replied, adjusting cutlery on one of the tables with almost surgical precision. The Golden Fork's dining room was a study in refined luxury. The dark wood walls, the oil paintings, the crystal chandeliers that cast a golden light over the customers, everything exuded exclusivity. Marcus was part of that scene, but only as an extra. The service began to pick up pace as the clients arrived. Senators, businessmen, and socialites took their seats, wrapped in discreet conversations and moderate laughter. Marcus moved fluidly among the tables, recommending wines, describing dishes, and ensuring that every detail was perfect. The mask of professionalism never fell. He had long lost count of how many times he was treated as both invisible and essential at the same time. Some clients completely ignored his presence. Others only noticed him to demand something. The first half of the shift passed without incident, until a tense murmur spread through the dining room. The intern was being reprimanded by a demanding customer. Marcus approached without hesitation. "Excuse me, sir, may I help you find a wine more suited to your taste?" he asked, his voice calm and firm. His presence seemed to calm the man, who grumbled something before accepting the new suggestion. When Marcus returned to the kitchen, Sarah waited for him with eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you. I thought I was going to fall apart right there." He continued adjusting a plate without looking at her. "The hardest part of this job isn't carrying plates or memorizing wines," he said. "It's remembering who you are, no matter how others see you." The night followed its course. The sound of elegant conversations, the clinking of glasses, and the murmur of soft jazz in the background created an atmosphere of calculated refinement. Amid it all, Marcus maintained his discreet presence, moving with the grace of someone who had learned to be seen and ignored at the same time. When the clock approached 11 p.m., the flow of customers diminished, and the team began to clean their stations. Marcus found a rare moment of tranquility at the service bar, where he polished crystal glasses. The jazz playing from the speaker was a familiar melody, something his grandmother used to hum while cooking on Sunday mornings. Before he knew it, he started humming along. "I didn't know you sang," Sarah commented, stacking menus near him. Marcus immediately stopped. "Just an old habit," he said, returning to work, but his fingers still tapped on the counter, following the rhythm of the music. He felt a presence beside him and turned in time to see Lisa, watching him with a slight smile on her lips. "You should do that more often, Marcus," she commented before leaving. But he did not reply. Singing was part of a past he had long buried. Outside, under the sky illuminated by the city's artificial lights, Marcus paused for a moment before getting into his car. With an almost unconscious gesture, he touched the side of his messenger bag, feeling the shape of the music book inside. Old habits never die completely. On the other side of town, Victoria Palmer strode through her office with firm, decisive steps. Her high heels echoed on the marble floor, resonating through the impeccably decorated space. At 29, Victoria was already a partner at Palmer & Associates, one of the largest real estate development companies in Boston. Her success was undeniable and meticulously planned. "No, absolutely not," she said into the phone, running her fingers through her impeccably aligned blonde hair. "We need those permits by Friday, or we'll take our business to another provider." She ended the call and swiveled her chair to face the panoramic view of the city. Boston's harbor shimmered under the nightlights, but Victoria barely noticed the beauty around her. Her mind was already on the next meeting, the next transaction, the next strategic move. The buzz of her cell phone pulled her from her thoughts. It was her father. She hesitated for a second before ignoring the call. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Cassandra, her closest friend. "Don't forget about dinner tonight at the Golden Fork. Trevor is bringing a new yacht broker friend. Grab the red Versace." Victoria sighed, typing a quick response before standing up. Dinners at the Golden Fork were a weekly tradition, a mix of strategic networking and pure social exhibitionism. That night, however, Victoria did not know that her path would cross with Marcus Thompson's, and that a single moment of arrogance would spark an unexpected transformation in their lives. The Golden Fork buzzed with unusual energy that night. The premier area, reserved for the most illustrious clients, was occupied by a private party, Victoria Palmer's 29th birthday celebration. 3 tables had been joined to accommodate the guests, and the bottles of Dom Perignon had already been emptied at an accelerated pace. The glow of the suspended chandeliers reflected in the crystal glasses, creating prisms of light that danced over silk and velvet surfaces. Marcus observed the scene from afar, maintaining impeccable composure as he moved among the tables. He was already familiar with that setting. Clients intoxicated by luxury, conversations interrupted by exaggerated laughter, and the judgmental glances that occasionally fell upon the restaurant's employees. As he approached Victoria's table, he heard Cassandra, Victoria's blonde friend, raise her glass and exclaim, "Another round for the birthday girl." The table burst into applause, and Marcus maintained his composure as he attended to the order. While he served more champagne, he caught fragments of a conversation that made him pause for a moment. "Remember last year," one of the men, clearly drunk, said to Victoria, "when you had that waitress recite Shakespeare?" Her laughter tinkled like crystal. "She said she was an actress," Victoria replied, with a smile that bordered on mischief. "I just gave her a chance to prove herself." Marcus felt his stomach turn. It was a game for them, but he did not show anything. He finished filling the glasses with surgical precision, preparing to move away from the table, when he felt something unexpected. Victoria's hand grasped his wrist. He froze. "You must know some songs, right?" Her voice was laden with false sweetness, yet her eyes betrayed something else, something deeper, something dangerous. Marcus straightened up. "Pardon, ma'am." Victoria tilted her head to the side, as if appraising him. "Sing for us, Marcus. Something spiritual, perhaps. Don't all your people have that in their blood?" The dining room seemed to stop. The conversation at the surrounding tables quieted. Some curious glances turned toward them. Marcus didn't need to look to know that Lisa from the service station was tense. The sound of pans from the kitchen ceased. Even Chef Antoine had heard it. Marcus clenched his fists discreetly. He knew how that scene would end. If he refused, he might be seen as someone who didn't know how to comport himself in front of important clients. If he accepted, he would become exactly what Victoria wanted him to be that night. An attraction, an impromptu entertainment number. But then something else happened. He looked directly into Victoria's eyes and saw something beyond the inebriated provocation. There was fatigue. Something that didn't match the impeccably dressed and self-assured woman commanding that table. She too was playing a role. Marcus took a deep breath. "If that's what you wish, Miss Palmer." Victoria blinked, seeming momentarily surprised. Then She leaned back in her chair and raised her glass. Marcus closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, he was no longer in the Golden Fork. He was back in the small church of his childhood beside his grandmother. He could hear her voice, teaching him to let his soul guide the song. And then he began to sing. The first note of Amazing Grace filled the restaurant, laden with something raw and true. Marcus's voice was rich, deep like a river that had flowed for centuries, shaping stones and stories along the way. The transformation was instantaneous. The murmur of the room dissolved. The conversations ceased. The cutlery was abandoned on the plates. The once indifferent gazes were now captured by something they had not expected to witness that night. Even the waiters moving between the tables stopped, mesmerized by the sound emanating from Marcus Thompson. How sweet the sound! The lyrics, so familiar and ancient, hung in the air like a prayer. Victoria, who had been relaxed in her chair just moments before, was now completely still. Her fingers gripped the stem of her glass tightly, yet she didn't seem to notice. There was something different in her face now. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to dispel a feeling she hadn't expected to experience. Marcus continued singing, his voice crossing the invisible barriers that had always existed within that restaurant. In the corner of the room, Chef Antoine stood with his arms crossed. His eyes shone with emotion. Lisa held her tray close to her chest, a light smile on her lips. The clients, who had once ignored Marcus, now looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Each note carried a piece of his history. Each word came from the depths of his soul. When he reached the last verse, something unexpected happened. Victoria Palmer began to cry, not discreetly, not like someone who had been touched by the music and shed a solitary tear. They were tears that came from a deep place, from a place she had spent years trying to bury. "My mother," she whispered, so softly that only Marcus could hear. And then she stood up. Without saying a word, without offering any explanations, Victoria Palmer grabbed her purse and left the restaurant, leaving behind an entire dining room in absolute silence. Marcus lowered his voice on the final verse and let the last note resonate softly in the space. The ensuing silence was absolute, and then the sound of applause came. A single customer clapped first, then another. In seconds, the entire restaurant was on its feet, clapping in a thunderous ovation. Lisa discreetly wiped a tear from her face. Chef Antoine crossed his arms, nodding in approval. Marcus, however, did not care about the applause. He was still thinking about what he had seen in Victoria Palmer's eyes before she fled. It was the beginning of something. He just didn't know what. Victoria Palmer's Mercedes glided through the streets of Boston, but her mind was still at the restaurant. Marcus's voice still echoed within her, bringing back memories she tried to forget. She stopped the car, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. She picked up the phone and opened a hidden folder of old photos. Her mother at the piano, smiling. A trembling sigh escaped her. On the other side of town, Marcus sat at the piano in his small apartment. His fingers touched the first notes of Amazing Grace. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories.